All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Angelina CAREGIVERSE. I am the Sexual Health Coordinator in the Office of Health Promotion and Education. And I am here today to talk with you about social well-being during quarantine and social distancing and everything that's going on in the world right now. So let's begin. Okay, so I wanted to start with a quick agenda. So we are going to be talking about social distancing and living alone, living with others, and living with others who might be getting on your nerves, and what to do if you are living with someone and you are feeling unsafe. So we'll dig into more detail in just a little bit, but I wanted to give a quick overview of what we were going to be looking at today. Living alone, what can you do? So it's really important to make sure that if you're living alone, you are still staying connected with family, friends, colleagues, whoever. And we're going to talk about some video chat options in a second. It's also totally okay if this pandemic is making you feel less like yourself. And even though it might be hard sometimes, it is important to try and get some activities going for yourself, something creative, silly, fun, whatever. So video chatting options, as I mentioned before, we were going to talk about some. There are so many. So as you can see, I've listed a few here. Some of them that I want to highlight, though, are House Party. That one's a lot of fun. So you can download that as a Google extension and then use it to play games with friends or family or coworkers, whoever, as long as they also have the app. It's accessible both by phone and computer, so long as you have a Wi-Fi connection. Another really great one that's on here that I have used myself is Google Hangouts. It was really easy to figure out. The learning curve was super small, and it already comes with your Google account if you have one. So real easy to do. You don't have to download anything for that. But I will give you a second on the slide to look at these options. Okay. So sometimes, as I've mentioned, chatting with folks requires boundaries. So I have prepared a video here to see what that might look like over a phone call with a family member. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video and then we will reconvene. What? Hey, Mom. Yeah, I was actually on Twitter. I just read like the most ridiculous thing about Tiger King. And no, not the Lion King. No, I promise they're very different. It's a documentary on Netflix and yeah, never mind. What are you doing? What's up? Oh, that's good. Yeah, yeah, we're doing okay. Yeah, we have plenty of food. I know. Yeah, I mean, classes are online still, and that's been kind of a weird transition, but I'm doing my best, you know. Just homework and Netflix. I started reading a new book. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, nothing else is new, really. Hey, could I ask you something? Do you think it would be okay if maybe we talked on the phone like once or twice a week instead of every day? Oh, no, it's just, you know, we're in quarantine, so I don't really have much to update you on, and I'm feeling a little overwhelmed right now, if I can be honest. Yeah, I love you too. Would it make you feel better if maybe I sent you a text every day just to check in so you knew I was all right? Yeah, I think that that would make me feel better too. Okay, I love you and I'll call you later, all right? Okay, bye, Mom. Okay, so the person in that video bears a striking resemblance to me. I know we don't have to talk about it, but what we should talk about is what we saw in that video. So there were some really clear I statements there. So I statements are when you own your own feelings and own what's going on with you. So we heard in the video a sentence that was similar to, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. So that was ownership over the feeling of being overwhelmed, rather than saying, you're bothering me, or you won't stop calling me, you won't leave me alone. I statements open the floor for conversation rather than an argument. There's a really distinct difference there. So take a second to try to think of some I statements that maybe you could use that would be helpful for you in this time. Okay, so the next thing that we saw, and the most important thing that we saw, was boundary setting. And of course, all of these skills are applicable outside of quarantine too. It just felt really apropos to talk about it now. So boundary setting is a really important skill that gets easier the more that you do it. The first time you do, it can feel a little scary. So I'm here to give you some tips about how to navigate that. So boundary setting is easiest with really set, I don't want to call them rules, but really set regulations, if you will. So we saw in the video that it was mentioned it might be easier to call mom once or twice a week rather than every single day. So once or twice a week sets a time limit and it sets a boundary. So rather than saying, well, I wish you would just call me less, it gave a really solid time frame of when calling would be okay. And that gives both the student in this video, who may or may not be me, and their parent a really nice time limit that they can stick to and follow, and they'll have a schedule moving forward. Another thing in the video that's worth mentioning is neutrality. So this might be a really difficult conversation for people to have, so I understand that entirely. It can definitely be tricky navigating calls like this, especially with loved ones or caregivers. But remaining neutral is one of the most important things that you can do. So we're not having these conversations to start arguments. We're having these conversations to set some boundaries and make sure that our mental health is in check. So remaining neutral, instead of starting an argument or getting angry or raising your voice, is the best thing you can do. And we'll see it again a little bit. We'll see it again in a little bit in the presentation. We talk about taking deep breaths before we have conversations with people, all of that good stuff. So I will save that for later. Feeling not quite yourself. So if you are not feeling quite like yourself in this quarantine, I completely understand, and you are not alone in that feeling. And of course, I trust that you can read, so I will pause in just a second to give you a chance to read over the list. But something I want to point out here is celebrating the small victories. So that is the third bullet from the bottom, celebrate small victories. So it's okay to not be productive during this time. And if the most productive thing that you've gotten done today is gotten out of bed, showered, maybe you opened up a cup of yogurt, maybe you ate a banana, maybe you ate a handful of Cheez-Its, that's great. That's great. I'm glad that you're eating and taking care of yourself. It's a really important thing to do, and it can feel especially hard during this time. So again, I want to make sure that folks are focusing on celebrating those small victories. This is not a time where people need to be super productive and develop 1,000 new hobbies, right? Just do what you need, because what you need is fair. So I'm going to pause for a second here and let you read over that list, and we can keep going in just a second. Okay, let's keep going. So it's okay to ask for help. It is absolutely okay to ask for help. Listed here are some resources that are accessible from the safety of your home or wherever you're staying during this time. Something I want to point out is that 7cups.com. That's that last resource that's offered in this list. You can vent online to volunteers who are there to listen. It works just like IMing or text messages or like Facebook chat. It's really easy to navigate. It's important to point out, though, that this is for people who are just maybe feeling frustrated or stressed and just want to vent. This is not a crisis line. If you are experiencing a crisis, you can dial 911 and speak to the operator. You also have the option of texting the crisis text line. So that's the number at the top there. So texting the word home to the phone number 741-741, and you will be connected with a volunteer who is trained to talk people through crisis situations. So again, there are some resources listed there for you, and I will pause here for just a second to let you write down any information you might want to write down. Okay, let's keep going. So finding fun where you can. This is so important, especially when things aren't feeling so great right now. I've got some examples listed up here of things that you could do to find some fun in your daily life. I think it's really important to continue doing things that you enjoy in this time, and don't let that get away from you if you can help it. You are obviously saying that there are some links in this. Those links are going to be in the description box below. So if you want to take a look at those links, I've provided a Spotify playlist there that I thought was kind of fun. Some more obscure tutorials on how to do things on YouTube. And yeah, there's just a list of ideas if you're feeling stuck. All right, so we're going to move into living with others now, focusing specifically on family and caregivers. So living with family and caregivers. So this might be a really great time for some families to spend some quality family time together. It's okay if you're not feeling up for that. That's totally fine. Another thing that I wanted to point out, which might be especially difficult for our more traditional aged college students who moved back home because of the closure of the residence halls, is lifestyle adjustments. So if something that works for you is, let's say, waking up at 10:30 or 11 in the morning every day, but you have a parent or a caregiver who is getting frustrated by that behavior, it's worth having a conversation about. If getting up at that time is what feels good and productive and okay for you, that's fine. And it's all about navigating those conversations with I statements and boundary setting and remaining neutral. So another thing we have on this list is empathy and understanding. As we've mentioned before, this is such a uncertain and scary time that we're all living through. It's going to bring up a lot of interesting feelings and emotions and all sorts of behaviors from people. So it's really important to take a step back and treat folks with empathy and understanding. Of course, this applies across the board, right? Not just to family and caregivers. But it's really important to make sure that these are things that we are still practicing through this quarantine. Or maybe you are someone who lives with a family member or a caregiver who is not following social distancing or isolation rules, and it's starting to trouble you. Again, I hear you, and you are not alone in that situation. So it's really important that when we try to talk to folks about behavior changing, that we focus on the behavior itself and not the person. So rather than saying, you are being ridiculous for not following social distancing, right? We want to make sure that we are talking about the behavior. So that would sound more like, I really would feel a lot better if you started following social distancing guidelines. They're doing this for our safety, and I care about your health and your well-being. So could you just hear me out about this? And that opens the floor for a conversation rather than an argument, which is what we're after, right? So you are the caregiver. So I did some digging around online and found that the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, offers some really great tips and tricks for mental health for parents and caregivers who are home with children at this time. Regardless of the age of the child, I think that the advice is pretty applicable across the board. So again, that link is going to be provided in the description box below. I also found some really awesome information from the AARP on caring for older family members. So again, that's going to be in the description box below as well. Feel free to check that out at your leisure. And of course, we know that at this time we have folks who are caring for partners or potentially caring for someone who has been affected health-wise by COVID-19. So it's really important that we're maintaining that 6-foot distance, washing our hands as often as possible, and not touching our own faces. Again, the CDC is a really great place to go for guidelines when it comes to caring for folks who have been affected health-wise by COVID-19. And that link is in the description box, as I mentioned before. Living with others, potentially roommates or one roommate. So living with roommates, so it's really important that when you're living in a shared living space with somebody that you are keeping up with your responsibilities within that living space. So keeping the apartment or house or what have you clean and organized is going to be really important. It might also bring in a sense of normalcy, right, through all of this. You want to be sure that you're dividing those tasks evenly. Don't put it all on one person to do the cleaning and the organizing, or just be responsible for yourself, right? So if you use a dish, you wash the dish, put it away, right? It's not too different from living with someone outside of quarantine. But for quarantine especially, we want to make sure that we're establishing some space and time to be alone and space and time to be together with our roommates. So this is a lot of together time for some folks. And some people love that, and some people are completely turned off by that idea. Either way is completely fine. So navigating that time in that space is really important when you're living with other people. And again, this applies across the board, not just your roommates. So having conversations around that should be kept open and honest. So again, I mentioned I statements here. We talked about that before. So that's ownership of your own feelings rather than placing blame on somebody else. Even planes. So if you are having a more difficult conversation with someone, it has been proven over and over again that that conversation is going to go smoother if you are on the same level as that person. So if I am sitting and my roommate is standing and we're having a tough conversation, there might be some perceived power there that might make having that conversation a little bit more difficult for me. So I would invite my roommate to sit down with me. Or vice versa. Maybe I could stand up. Either way, you want to make sure that those playing fields or those planes are even. It will make the conversation easier. Finally, I have cool, calm, and collected down there. So that goes along with the idea of remaining neutral. We want to be sure that we are opening the floor for conversation rather than arguments. I'm going to say that so many times you're going to get sick of it. But hopefully this is all making sense, and I'm going to keep moving on. So living with others, significant others. So consent and safe sex. As I mentioned before, I am the sexual health coordinator here at Western. So a lot of my job focuses on talking about consent and safe sex. So it just made sense to put that in here. So we come from a place of talking about affirmative consent, or the idea that yes means yes, rather than the word no meaning no. Because research has shown that sometimes when people get scared or uncomfortable, they freeze up and they don't know what to do and they don't say anything and they just sort of shut down. So just because that person isn't saying no, it might come across that they aren't wanting to participate in a sexual activity. So you want to make sure that you are hearing a clear, enthusiastic, and consistent yes, right? Something else that I'd like to address that will more than likely be touched on in more detail in the alcohol and other drugs presentation that is coming from our office is the idea of consent and alcohol. I get that question a lot in this field. So we know that if there is alcohol present in the system, there is no consent. So if a person has been drinking, they cannot consent to safe sex. So what does that mean, right? Does that mean that after one drink, a person can't consent? Does that mean after 10 drinks, a person can't consent? Well, it all depends on what is considered a safe and healthy drinking level for you. So if somebody's BAC is at 0.06%, that is considered a safe range to be drinking in. And again, I'm sure that will be talked about more in the other presentation, so I will show you the details on that one, but it is really important to make sure that you're obtaining consent from partners. And as I mentioned before, a continuous yes. right? So making sure that your partners are on board the entire time. I also wanted to touch on barrier methods. Again, because we are quarantined, right? We still have access to barrier methods through stores like Meijer or Walmart, Target, right? You can purchase these things there. So we have internal condoms, and that is that picture with the purple background. The internal condom can be inserted into the vaginal canal, or the ring in the bottom that the hand is holding can be removed and it can be inserted into the anus. These work really well for people. They have a pretty consistent success rate, hovering somewhere around 85 to 90% effective. These can also be worn up to 4 hours before sexual intercourse, so they can be inserted up to 4 hours before sexual intercourse and stay there, no trouble. It does need to come out when the sexual intercourse is complete. We have external condoms or condoms that go onto a penis. Those are usually what we think of when we think of condoms, right? That's the picture with the orange background. So a condom is placed over the shaft of the penis and rolled down to the base of the penis. And a condom is put on just before sex and taken off just after. Both internal and external condoms, and dental dams for that matter, are not reusable, as I would just, one and done with that situation, throw it away when you're done. Condoms, external condoms come in latex form. They also come in lambskin form. Latex condoms do prevent against STIs. Lambskin forms usually do not. I have dental dams pictured here as well. So that's the picture with the yellow background. Dental dams are a thin sheet of latex that is placed over either the vulva or the anus, and they are used for oral pleasure. And if you have any questions about that or anything that we've set up until this point, my email will be listed at the end of this PowerPoint. Feel free to shoot me an email and we can chat all day about barrier methods. It is literally my job, so I'd be happy to. So living with others who are potentially getting on your nerves. So again, living with someone who's getting on your nerves, it's important to set aside that alone time, right? And maybe it's time to do your homework or time to get some work done for your job. And just really taking that time to step away from the living situation that you're in, be it with like roommates or family members, find a quiet space to do some homework, maybe sit in your bedroom. I'm currently at my kitchen table. This works great for me. We want to make sure that we're remembering boundary setting. Again, that is completely okay to do in any situation, quarantine especially. We want to just make sure we're being specific about those boundaries and neutral. I mentioned finding a space to be alone, but even outside of homework or work activities, if you just need some alone time by yourself, completely okay. And if you're feeling upset, you want to make sure that we're taking deep breaths before we respond to things. Other techniques I've heard are counting to 10 before you respond to things, right? We just want to make sure that we are having conversations rather than arguments. So living with others and you're potentially feeling unsafe. So here are some good resources to know. You can call 911, but begin to order a pizza. So instead of having a usual conversation with the 911 dispatcher, you can begin a pizza order, because what's included in a pizza order, right? They need your address. They need to know where you live. They'll let you know how soon they'll be there. 911 dispatchers are trained to take every single call that they get seriously, because it is illegal to dial 911 as a joke or a prank. So they will just continue asking yes or no questions until they can get someone there to help you. Again, texting 911. So depending on the municipality you live in, I am unsure of where everyone went home to. So that's definitely something that you would want to check in with. Texting 911 is an option. But again, that depends on what municipality you're living in. So check with your local public safety officers, and I'm sure that they would be able to give you correct information on that. The last thing that I have on here is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. So you can chat with them online. That's the website address right there. Again, that works just like Facebook Instant Messenger or texting, pops right up on your screen, really easy to do. You also have the option to text LOVEIS, LOVEIS, to the number 225 622, and you'll be able to get some resources and help there. I've also provided their phone number if calling would make you feel more comfortable. That's listed at the bottom of the slide. And I'm going to give a second here for folks to write down any information that they might need. Okay. So that is pretty much a wrap up on the social well-being presentation. So I just wanted to touch on some really important stuff we talked about. So setting boundaries, super beneficial during this time, really anytime, just make sure you're specific with those boundaries. It's also totally okay to feel sad, angry, overwhelmed, anxious, or whatever emotions are arising for you at this time. It's completely understandable and it's okay. Whatever you're feeling is valid. It's also really important to keep in mind that we can only control what we can. So something I'd suggested at the beginning is sitting down and writing a list of things that you know you still have control over and focusing on those. We also want to make sure that we are still making time for ourselves and things that we like to do, right? So maybe for you, that's going on a run or knitting, or maybe it's watching Netflix movies or reading a book, right? So make sure that you still have time in your day to do things that you enjoy. And finally, stay inside and stay safe. And that about wraps up my presentation. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns that you would like to talk about with me, my email is listed there. Again, my name is Angelina CAREGIVERSE, and I am the Sexual Health Coordinator for the Office of Health Promotion and Education. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have an excellent rest of your day.